there, I'm Lindsay France. This is Boom Boss, broadcasting around the world from Washington, D.C. Tonight, the UK sees a massive drop in the number of citizens from the European Union coming to live within its borders. And larger than expected numbers of these people are leaving. We face upcoming elections on June 8th, and the Labour Party appears to be closing the gap in the polls. Also, Venezuela and Goldman Sachs. Things are not looking good. The banking giant is in trouble as the government opposition there threatens to not repay $2.8 billion in bonds. It accuses that banking giant of making a quick buck off the suffering of the people. And my guest, former U.S. Trading Commissioner Bart Chilton, joins us to explain the astronomical jump in the value of Bitcoin. We also talk cryptocurrency and the ever-important blockchain. Stand by. Boom Boss starts right now. Employers in the UK are worried about a labour market scramble as 40,000 more citizens of the EU left its borders in 2016 than the year before. This is along with a 43,000-person drop in the number of EU citizens immigrating to the country. It's created a net migration of 248,000. That's 25% lower than just before the UK voted to leave the European Union last summer. Its unemployment rate currently is the lowest since 1975, and companies say they could be losing key EU employees after Brexit negotiations. However, that is an example which UK Prime Minister Theresa May has used to urge employers to invest in training homegrown workers. The UK elections coming up on June 8th could bolster support for Prime Minister Theresa May's Conservative government and ramp up momentum for Brexit negotiations immediately after. UK Brexit Secretary David Davis insists that the subject of EU citizens living in the UK will be the first order of business during exit agreements. However, Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party is now closing in on May's Conservatives in approval ratings. Goldman Sachs is facing mounting backlash for buying $2.8 billion in bonds from Venezuela as the country remains mired in political turmoil. Venezuela's opposition says the Wall Street investment bank should not be repaid for aiding and abetting a government accused of systematic violation of human rights. Now, 2 months of ongoing protests against Nicolas Maduro's government has reportedly left at least 60 dead and some 2,700 people imprisoned. RT's Marina Portnaya brings us the details.
Opposition leaders in Venezuela are threatening to forego paying Goldman Sachs after learning the Wall Street Bank struck a multi-billion-dollar bond deal with the country's unpopular government. As first reported by the Wall Street Journal, Goldman purchased $2.8 billion in bonds from the Venezuelan state-run oil company PDVSA at a steeply discounted price. The investment bank allegedly paid just 31 cents on the dollar, or $865 million, for bonds originally worth $2.8 billion, a deep discount yielding high returns. Now, this comes as Venezuela continues spiraling into a humanitarian crisis, with citizens facing shortages of food, medicine, water, and even basic necessities like toilet paper. On Monday, the country's top opposition leader fired off a letter to Goldman Sachs CEO Lloyd Blankfein, accusing the investment bank of providing a financial lifeline to an embattled government cracking down on dissent, writing in part, quote, "It is apparent Goldman Sachs decided to make a quick buck off the suffering of the Venezuelan people. Given the irregular nature of this transaction and the absurd financial terms involved that are to the detriment of Venezuela and its people, the National Assembly will soon launch an investigation into the matter. I also intend to recommend to any future democratic government of Venezuela not to recognize or pay on these bonds, unquote. Nearly daily protests against Nicolas Maduro's administration have continued for 60 days, with demonstrators flooding the streets demanding early presidential elections. While critics accuse Goldman of buying so-called hunger bonds from the Venezuelan government, the bank released a statement saying in part, quote, "We recognize that the situation is complex and evolving and that Venezuela is in crisis. We agree that life there has to get better. We made the investment in part because we believe it will," unquote. Goldman says it bought the bonds issued in 2014 from another broker, avoiding direct interaction with the Venezuelan government. However, experts say the immediate increase in Venezuela's reserves indicates Goldman's money went straight to Maduro's coffers. On Tuesday, Venezuela's opposition-controlled National Assembly debated Goldman's bond purchase at a 69% discount and planned to issue a resolution condemning the sale. Reporting from Miami, Marina Portnaya, RT.
Well, consumer inflation in Germany slowed more than estimated in the month of May. It hit below 2%. This is just under the European Central Bank's target. That price pressure in the European Union's largest economy is modest despite its upswing, its growing labor market, and the lax monetary policy practiced by the ECB. Populists may have been defeated in France and the Netherlands this year, but their fight still isn't over in the EU. Over in Italy, the government is moving toward an early vote on a new law that could threaten the nation's establishment leaders. Boom boss Bianca Fascini has more on that for us.
Now that the Trump presidency and impending Brexit have been accepted as reality, all eyes are focused on Italy. Italy's political parties are currently deliberating a new electoral law that would create proportional representation in parliament, and it would establish a 5% cutoff for smaller parties, making it easier for them to gain seats. Enacting the law would lead to a snap election, meaning voters would no longer have to wait until next year to vote. The country's populist Five Star movement has expressed support for that, though it's not the only party that's pushing for the law. In fact, 3 other major parties have signaled their approval, and so has former Prime Minister Matteo Renzi. And he suggested holding the vote in September, near the time of Germany's elections, which he claims would reduce risk. But that would only happen if German Chancellor Angela Merkel wins that election. Merkel is currently ahead in most polls, but the figures are much tighter in Italy, with the center-left Democratic Party and Five Star at 30% each. Upon learning of across-the-board support for the proposal, Italy's markets didn't react very kindly, particularly where banks are involved. And the rest of the markets in Europe responded in a similar fashion, considering other drama happening throughout the EU. On Monday, Greece's finance minister suggested the government may not accept another bailout deal with creditors, meaning they could default in July. In the end, Italy has to hold elections by May of 2018. On top of that, Parliament needs to propose a budget with billions of dollars in spending cuts by October and pass it by the end of the year.
That was boom boss Bianca Fascini there for us. Now it's facing down the Boeing Airbus duopoly, but the MS-21 flew through the skies on lightweight carbon composite wings over the weekend. The first passenger jet to do so. In fact, its successful 30-minute maiden voyage showcases a big change in jet building as manufacturers race to find cheaper and faster ways to build with composites. Now, it's made by Russia's United Aircraft Corporation. Production of the MS-21 is expected to start in the next 2 years. The company says it already has firm orders for 175 planes and that costs for operations will be cut by 15% compared to current aircraft. Researchers have identified a completely new and overlooked way for hackers to attack computers. Viruses hidden in online film subtitles are now putting millions of files at risk. However, most of these people's material is infected while illegally downloading media. Sorry about that. Now, could hackers end up curbing piracy by fighting crime with crime? RT's Brigida Santos has the story from Los Angeles.
Researchers with the security firm Checkpoint recently discovered the flaw that may affect 200 million users worldwide. Experts estimate that video players and media streaming software, including VLC, Kodi, Popcorn Time, and Stream.io, are vulnerable to malicious attacks. The players are mainly used to view pirated movies and television shows. While piracy is illegal, the practice is becoming increasingly widespread, costing Hollywood billions of dollars in revenue. A survey this year conducted by anti-piracy firm Erdetto shows that 1/3 of U.S. adults admit to streaming or downloading illegal content. That number jumps to 69% among millennials, according to a similar study. In many cases, these media players aren't just downloading pirated content, they are also simultaneously downloading movie subtitles, which are used to then deliver the attack. Researchers say that unlike traditional attack vectors, which security firms and users are aware of, quote, movie subtitles are perceived as nothing more than benign text files. This means users, antivirus software, and other security solutions vet them without trying to assess their real nature. Because little to no security is implemented, devices are easily infected, allowing hackers to take complete control of the device. From there, hackers can steal sensitive information, install ransomware, and engage in other malicious activities. Some devices that can be compromised include smart TVs, PCs, tablets, and mobile phones. All companies say they have patched the vulnerabilities and are advising users to update their software to the latest version. But users may want to think twice before downloading content illegally if they truly want to remain protected. After all, they are breaking the law and may be subject to criminal charges. In Los Angeles, Brigitte Santos, RT.
Time now for a quick break, but stick around because when we get back, we've got oil prices and forecasts. They take a dip on the heels of the OPEC agreement to extend production cuts. And my guest, former U.S. Trading Commissioner Bart Chilton, joins me to discuss Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and the blockchain. As we go to break, here are the numbers at the closing bell.
All the world's a stage.
And all the news companies, merely players. But what kind of part does RT America play?
RT America
offers more.
RT America offers more.
In many ways, the news landscape is just like the theater.
Real news,
Fake news.
Good actors.
bad actors, and in the end, you can never outwit your audience.
So what part can we play? All the world's a stage.
All the world's a stage.
All the world's a stage.
And we are definitely a player.
I'm a trial lawyer. I've spent countless hours pouring through documents that tell the story about the ugliest side of corporate America. Corporate media refuses to talk about these issues.
The conduct by this company was deplorable.
I'm going to paint a clear picture about how disturbing, how corrupt corporate conduct has become in modern America. These are stories that no one else can tell. I'm Mike Papantonio, host of America's Lawyer. Question more.
What'd you have for breakfast yesterday? Why would you pick those shoes? How fast is your Wi-Fi? What's your dog's name? Why'd you name him that? What's your biggest fear in life? Ever been on a hayride? When's the last time you read a book? What would you say if you ever met the Pope? Who's the best quarterback of all time? What's one topping that doesn't belong on a pizza? Now, I've interviewed you too. Question more.
Even after last week's extension of a production cut agreement between members of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries and its affiliates, oil prices took a plunge. Today, they dipped more than 1%. Worry persists that an extension won't make enough of a dent to drain the oil glut and raise prices. Also, member nation Libya shows signs of ramping up production to 800,000 barrels per day, according to its state-run National Oil Corporation. Brent crude fell 1.7% to $51.42 a barrel. U.S. light crude was 1.2% lower at $49.21. Output by OPEC and other producers will be held around 1.8 million barrels per day below its level at the end of last year. As shale production booms in the United States, Goldman Sachs has cut its price forecast, saying falling U.S. production costs will keep supply on an upward trend for years to come. Last week, Bitcoin saw the highest price ever for the cryptocurrency. It rose to $2,791, but then it dropped 30% to $1,900 before rebounding somewhat to roughly $2,200. Some analysts say it could rise to $10,000 in the next year, while others predict a big crash is on the way. Is the recent volatility symptomatic of Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies in general? Here to talk cryptocurrencies and related matters, former U.S. Trading Commissioner Bart Chilton. Hey.
Hey.
Happy after a long weekend to you. Now, you were one of the first government officials to really talk about Bitcoin in depth, talking to the media about it, talking about it amongst your colleagues. Yep. You've been concerned about its illicit use and consumer protection. So does all of this price volatility make you nervous?
It does. I mean, these are incredible swings that we've seen. And, you know, all of these cryptocurrencies, Lindsay, are really the darkest of the dark markets. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I think there's a place for them in the future, but, you know, buyer, investor, beware, because you never know when things are going to go awry. And when the prices are so high, people could actually lose a lot of money. So, yeah, I'm still concerned about the volatility and the price has been so high.
Well, a lot of people are obviously very happy. They've made a lot of money in the last week, especially. They're putting their cash in Bitcoin. Are you less concerned about money laundering or illicit uses and more concerned about, you know, consumer protections? I mean, what raised your concern over the years?
So originally it was not only the consumer protections, that there was no there. It wasn't like a, you know, a barrel of oil or a bar of gold. There was no substance there. So that just gave me, you know, concerns at first. But then, you know, the illicit use for money laundering, and there was a big case, as you recall, back in 2013 called Silk Road. This guy that invented it, his pseudonym was Dread Pirate Roberts. That should have given a lot of people pause there about where you put your money. But, you know, it was being used, the black market there, Silk Road, for illicit drugs, money laundering.
Selling big guns to bad people.
Yeah, that guy, by the way, is in jail for the rest of his life. No possibility of parole.
Very interesting
So if you invested in Silk Road at that time, you'd be screwed. And then Mt. Gox, just in 2014, which was the largest Bitcoin exchange, it was in Japan. 70% of the Bitcoin transactions worldwide were done at Mt. Gox. It went belly up because it got hacked. $450 million, US dollars equivalent, in Bitcoins were gone. That was 850,000 Bitcoins. Now, they found a couple of 100,000 of those, but still, they went bankrupt, and those people, had they invested at the beginning. So you're saying, yeah, there are people who are happy that made all sorts of money. Well, if you had your money at Mt. Gox, you were SOL. Yeah. And those guys were screwed. Yeah, and you can't pull those gold bars out because there's nothing tangible there. Now, government officials seem to be of two minds on Bitcoin. On the one hand, you have Japan legalizing it. Korea's even using it. They want to tax it. Then you see Bitcoin banned in some nations. There's a story out today about arrests in Bolivia that are related to Bitcoin. Why are there so many divergent views from global government officials? Because business seems to be another question, but the governments seem to be kind of bipolar on this. So if you take half a step back, it's because government regulators are used to doing what they do, right? Regulate. And when they see something they don't know, they get concerned and they want to, you know, put their feet in the water. The challenge has been whether or not those that invented and worked on Bitcoin want to have anything to do with government, and they don't. And so they've been MIA. So when you see things like Mt. Gox that we discussed in Japan and it went under, what you had was the government coming in, and contrary to what most people thought would happen in Japan, which was just make Bitcoin illegal, in this case, they actually regulated it. Yeah. And that's where all this commerce is coming from. So kudos to the Japanese regulator for seeing that we had a problem, it wasn't regulated. Now they've got regulation, and it's in retail, and most of the trading occurring in Bitcoin is taking place over there. But it's really a question of what is that balance, like everything, about enough regulation that protects consumers, but not so much that it crimps the style of these digital currencies.
You don't want to get in the way of that because that's the spirit of the Bitcoin.
Absolutely
of course, you don't want to get people in danger. So let's talk about some of the other cryptocurrencies because there's a lot at play.
Yeah. There's 830 different cryptocurrencies.
When you told me that at first, I thought I was going to
Isn't that
faint.
an amazing
but yeah,
number?
it is an amazing
I mean,
number.
crazy names, Dogecoin, Mike the Mug.
Mike the Mug, I like that
Mike the Mug, yeah. There's a bunch of them. Coinlight,
People
Ripple's
don't
a big
realize
one.
this, but do you think anything's going to really come up and be able to compete with Bitcoin? Because it's taken Bitcoin years to even get, I don't want to say household recognition, but market recognition for what it is. It just seems kind of flooded.
Ultimately, I think we will have some digital currencies. I don't know if it's going to be Bitcoin. The other one that's pretty popular, trading about, I don't know, 240 or something like that, is Ethereum, is the company.
We hear a lot of talk about that.
The actual tokens are called Ether. Which again, I don't know about branding if things go up in the ether, but they seem to be a close second to Bitcoin. But I think if we look, 5-10 years down the road, we will see digital currencies in use. I'm just not sure it's going to be Bitcoin because I get worried about where that's going now.
So you're not saying we're going to have, hundreds of cryptocurrencies, just a few that'll be the most popular, do you think?
Yeah, I think we'll come down to maybe 20, or maybe you'll have 15 or 20, and then you might have, say, 15 or so that are specific. So there's one called, unbelievably, Potcoin. You can guess what that's, it doesn't have anything to do with jars. And so that's used just for really one purpose and paraphernalia, I suppose.
And it's going to market itself as
so
as
there's
that.
Skycoin,
This is your
it deals
thing.
with air travel. So you may have these sort of designer coins for different sort of things that need to be a transaction. But as far as things like Bitcoin that will theoretically be used for all sorts of things, I think it'll be limited to 15 or 20, and maybe even less if we look down the road 5-10 years.
Well, let's talk about, what these cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin and others, are based on, blockchain. Can you help explain that to people so they kind of understand how this works?
Sure. Well, the blockchain are essentially, what the blockchain is it's a bunch of people who are confirming a transaction. So you and I do a transaction, we put it up in a computer, and then other people, they call them nodes, which are computers essentially, they go ahead and they verify that. And once it's verified, then it's an inalterable record. One gets added to another, and you have a chain. So it's every one of these blocks into a chain. And so that technology, that software is the miracle of not just Bitcoin, but all of the cryptocurrencies. And now what we see being done with it, Lindsay, is it's being used in real estate, it's being used in healthcare. I know there's a friend of mine, he has a company in England called Luther Systems. They're doing a major project with the largest health insurer in the UK. You think about the WannaCry virus a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
And one of the big deals was, the biggest deal was it went into the national health system over the UK.
Right.
Well, had this been up and running, this blockchain system designed by Luther's system at, I think it's Aviva is what it's called, the largest health insurer in the UK, those records would be unalterable and immune from hacks. So ultimately, the blockchain, I'm a big fan of. Smart contracts, and whether or not it's real estate or intellectual property, anything, I think that's the wave of the future. And I think the blockchain is going to revolutionize commerce around the world.
What do you think about a possible asset bubble with the Bitcoin? Do you think that's going to happen? We're going to crash? People are talking about $10,000, really.
Yeah, some people are saying 10,000, something, and I get suspect anytime as you know, I wrote a book called Ponzimonium, How Scam Artists Are Ripping Off America, and something like that saying it's going to go to 10,000 would be like a big red flag. But I think there's not only an asset bubble, I think it's probably a dirigible, and if it goes down, maybe it'll be a Led Zeppelin, and people will be dazed and confused for so long it's not true, because they won't know where their money has gone. So I am concerned about this asset bubble. I do think Bitcoin is one now. That doesn't mean that it's not something to be involved in, but boy, if people are buying in at, I think it's, before we went on the air, it was $22.99.
Yeah, right.
If they're buying at that, I wouldn't be counting on getting that out.
Well, and then it dropped $500 in a matter of days. And not only that, a lot of these Bitcoin proponents are going after an exchange-traded fund, the Winklevi, I think they call it. Winklevi, excuse me. That's right. They were going after an ETF. We've talked about that they were pushing for it. It got denied, and they're still pushing for it, and they really think it's going to happen. But you take one look at this volatility, that's never going to get approved, right?
Right. Well, it might be approved. That's at my sister regulatory agency back in the day, the Securities and Exchange Commission. But a lot of these things that they're doing is a lot of these coins, the one that you showed on the screen a little bit ago, is they are doing, instead of initial public offerings, they are doing things called initial coin offerings, ICOs. And they are trying to raise money to start these coins off, to get enough money to have the computer power and the software and everything. And one of them, unbelievably, just earlier this year, called New Alchemy, they raised in 3 minutes, Lindsay, $16 million. I mean, it's not just Bitcoin that is on a tear. There are things out there in the digital currency crypto space that are really taking off. And, you know, again, I think that the challenge is, how do you look at these things, provide the open road so that they can prosper and have a free wheel and not be constrained by government, but have adequate consumer protections. And so I've been urging that for years and years and years, and I still believe it's the right thing, because what will happen is, say some currency, say it's Bitcoin or one of the others, takes a big fall, is what you might find is that a government doesn't do what Japan did and say we got to regulate this smarter, is that they will cut it off. And there are 10 or 12 countries right now that have just said, it's banned. You mentioned Bolivia, where 60 people were arrested yesterday related to Bitcoin. They called it a Ponzi scam. It's illegal there. It's illegal in Russia. It's illegal in China. It's illegal in India, just to name a few. So it's a big deal. We got to keep our eye on it.
And those are big economies. Always interesting to touch on this. You don't hear about this a lot in mainstream media. It's always interesting to get your breakdown of it. Thank you very much, former U.S. Trading Commissioner Bart Shelton. A catastrophic breakdown in British Airways computer systems over the weekend meant 75,000 people didn't get to their destinations. On Saturday, when the company's computer systems went down, there was no functioning backup. The airline canceled all flights and didn't resume full service until today. Shares in its parent company, International Airlines Group, dropped 3%. Computer systems crises like this are proving a problem for older established airlines, which have not undertaken the complicated and very costly overhauls. In August, Delta Airlines canceled hundreds of flights when a power outage knocked out its computer systems worldwide. That's all for now. Check out the show on YouTube, youtube.com/BoomBustRT. Thanks for watching. See you next time.